What's the most amazing coincidence that has ever happened to you? I was at a bar in Dallas on St. Patrick's Day and I asked a guy about 30 years older than me if I could borrow a lighter. He said something back in a Dublin accent. I asked if he was from Dublin. He said yes. I jokingly said, I wonder if you know my dad, he is from Dublin. The guy of course said no way, it is a huge city. But my grandfather owned a building with his name on it real big, so I asked if he knew of the street it was on. Then I asked him if he knew my grandfather's building. Turns out he used to work for my grandfather and lived with my uncle and was in fact friends with my dad. Small world. Being Irish is literally one giant game of 6 degrees of separation. Went for coffee with a potential new housemate with 2 other confirmed housemates. Get chatting to the potential new housemate and find out she's from Spain. One of my confirmed housemates is from Spain and asked where she was from. Long story short, they're from the same town, went to the same school, and live streets away from each other. Further conversation reveals that they were actually part of the same group of friends when they were really young kids, and their parents used to hang out together. And they both coincidentally left Spain at the same time to go to the same, not very well known or big university, and nearly ended up living together. I picked up the house phone to call a friend and he was already on the line. He had called me and I had picked up the receive just before it had a chance to ring. Blew my freaking mind. When I was in college in Texas, back in the early 90s, I took a summer trip to England. My flight left on the last day of classes. I had an English paper due that day, and the prof insisted that it was due in his box by noon. Of course I procrastinated, and didn't turn it in until 1 o'clock, and mine was the only paper in there. I was sure I had screwed up, but I had to go catch my flight. I got to London and the next day I was on the tube, telling my friend that I was sure I had failed the class because the prof never got my paper. It's going to be hanging over my head the entire trip, I said. There's no way I'll know if he got my paper. We arrived at our stop. The doors opened and there was my prof, waiting for the train. Professor X. Did you get my paper? Yes I did. Great, thanks, I said, and went on to enjoy my holiday. Lightning fast grader. As a kid my parents took me to Butlins one year, an all-inclusive kid-friendly holiday park in the UK, and got on really well with the neighbors. The next year we went to Spain, and the same family was in the same hotel for the same 2 weeks as us. The next year we went to a different Butlins, and our first week there was the same family as second week. My parents and their parents made plans to meet up again the next year, and we never saw each other again. I like how that ended abruptly when plans were made. When I was in college my girlfriend and I were doing the hostel thing in Europe one summer. We were broke but her mom worked for a big airline, so the airfare was super cheap. After London we went to Paris, and her mother suggested that we look up her old work colleague Kurt and see if we could stay with him. Free board? Sounds great. So we called, and his wife answered. Kurt was out of town, but called back tomorrow once they'd had a chance to talk. We did, and Kurt said it would be fine. Gave us directions and we were set. When we got off at the metro we were immediately lost, but we called Kurt back and he said just wait, he'd come get us. Which he did. Everything was immediately super awkward, but what are you gonna do? The small talk was even more strained. So, you still work for Delta? No, I'm in technical writing. Weird, basic details just were not lining up. We got back to their house. I took a shower. His daughter come home from school, and it has probably been 90 minutes since we'd met face to face, and Kurt decides to drop this bomb on us. Hey listen, you seem real nice, but I don't think that I know who you are. I talked to my wife though, and if you want you can stay here for the night, but you're Kurt. I am, but I never worked for Delta and I don't think we've ever met. True. We called back her mom. Turns out we had Kurt's phone number 1 digit off. We'd swapped a 5 for a 2, called the wrong number, and got a different American named Kurt, living in Paris, and then we'd gone to his house, pretended to know each other, I took a dang shower, and then we all agreed we were total strangers. We called the right number, got the real Kurt who lived like 2 miles away, and whose daughter was in the same class at school. Both Kurts were lovely, but we opted to stay with the one we knew. Sounds like a comedy. A couple of summers ago, I was in my kayak in a shallow inlet of my favorite lake in the Finger Lakes region of New York. I'd stopped to eat my sandwich and read the book I'd brought with me. One sentence read, "Just then, a great blue heron flew overhead." I looked up and just then, a great blue heron flew overhead. Nothing better than summer in the Finger Lakes. Going to a bar in a different country. Bartender wanted to see my identification, so I showed him my stated, "I have somewhat of a rare name." Turns out that was exactly his name as well. He called his father, who came down to meet me as well. We had a good conversation over some beers. Bill Buttliker. I was hit by decompression illness, the bends, and lost the ability to coherently communicate. It's very similar to having a stroke. I started wandering aimlessly down an island road and stumbled upon a random medical center. Perfect. Upon entering, I realized I couldn't speak properly and most people thought I was on drugs. I was unable to tell anyone what was happening, and as I'm being turned away, the dive instructor I was diving with was right behind me. Between where I was and the dive center there were easily 3 or 4 medical clinics he could have gone to, but he went to this one. He was able to fill in my forms for me as I couldn't remember my name. Even better, my landlord owned the only decompression chamber on the island, so she zoomed me straight in without having to wait for paperwork. Luckiest day of my life. I'm attorney. I met with a client pursuing disability benefits. Very sick and very sympathetic. She had an open and shut case, to the point I even suggested that she file on her own so she could avoid paying me anything. "You don't know my maiden name. It's Ms. Smith. You represented my brother 2 years ago. You arranged for members of the community to rebuild his house. If I end up paying $10,000 it would not be enough to cover what you have done for my family. I was literally thinking about quitting what I do, just the day before. But first, we make all the lawyers feel wholesome. I was taken by CPS when I was 2, adopted by the same foster family that originally took me in when I was 5. Came with one baby picture and maybe a toy. No contact allowed with bio family, as per court ruling. Q 20 some odd years later, I'm working as a pizza delivery driver. Quit, come back a year later when another job doesn't work out. I'm friendly with one of the drivers there, an older guy who's driving for something to do after retiring from the social work field. I notice on Facebook he's friends with my half brother. Ask him about it, thinking maybe it was due to his old job or something. Turns out he used to be married to my bio aunt, sister of my bio mom. He babysat me a bunch when I was a baby, and his ex-wife left a ton of junk in the divorce, including my baby pictures. He let me have them. Mom just about cried when I showed them to her. When I was young I lived in Germany, military brat. My brother and I played with the neighbor's son who was about our age, younger than me, older than my brother. The German boy's mother had an older sister who lived in the US. Jump years forward and I am in college. My wife and I were dating seriously and I went to Chicago to meet her family for the first time. While there I discovered that her neighbor was the sister who had moved to the US. Even crazier, her oldest son owned a business in the town my parents had retired in. The final crazy part of the entire coincidence is shortly after we married I was offered a job in Pennsylvania. We moved and once we got a place met the neighbors. One of them was the original German boy I played with as a child going to school here in the States. It's been over a decade since and no other cray run-ins, but never know what tomorrow will bring. Crazy how small the world really is. I moved to Vegas and worked at a car dealership and a girl I went to high school with randomly walked in with her parents one day like 4 years later. My husband, his older sister and his mother all had the exact same dream about his twin sister randomly dying one night. When I asked if any of them were going to call her and check up on her they all looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, I get it. I'm not superstitious really, but it was such a weird dream for them all to have. She was fine. By the way, I always check on people when I have dreams like this. When I was 9, I had a best friend named Naomi. The next year, I moved to another state and Naomi and I lost touch. Nearly 8 years later, when I was taking a standardized test to get into college, who do I run into at the test center? Naomi. Now here's the best part. The test was in a different state to the one we previously lived in. Also, all the candidates writing the test were randomly assigned test centers within the state. Best coincidence ever. I was going to Malta from the US for a work trip. I had a layover in Rome, so I extended it so I could stay the weekend in Rome before the show. Sure enough, bags didn't make it to Rome. I was told they would be getting in on my same flight from Rome to Malta. Show up to Malta, no bags. There were a couple colleagues on my flight and their luggage was also lost. We submitted our claims, walked out of the airport defeated, and a colleague nonchalantly sarcastically says, "That's probably your bag in the bushes over there." It was. My dad makes shepherd's pie for dinner sometimes, but he hadn't in nearly a year. One day at school, a couple of my friends made shepherds in their cooking class. I had some and it was pretty good, and I planned on asking my dad to make it one day soon. I arrived home later that day and told my dad. I think you can guess what was already in the oven. I was kicked out of a concert in Grand Prairie, Texas. It was at a large venue and I got in front row and yelled that the singer sucked. 10 years later I had moved like an hour from my hometown and got a roommate that I didn't know. One night he was telling me the story about the concert and the guy who was kicked out. Apparently he was also there and thought it was great. I was so scared your roommate was going to be the singer. Went grocery shopping with GF. We both bought pineapples. We checked out through adjacent lanes. When I got to her home, she realized she forgot to take the pineapple she had bought. So I told her she can have mine, and I will go to the store on my way home and pick up hers. When I went to the car, I realized I forgot my pineapple too. So imagine me going to one lane asking, "Did I leave a pineapple here?" Then walking to the next lane with a pineapple in hand and asking the same question. Both cashiers had a what the heck look on their faces. This made me laugh. On honeymoon, halfway across the world on a 30-person plane between small cities in Thailand, we deplane and I hear my name called. Classmate from 10 years prior, was great friend, was on the same plane. I met my partner at the restaurant we used to work at together. We had similar interests, music, films, animals, speech and debate, etc. He even told me he went to film school and that he made a documentary. I had to pinch myself. An educated art boy, I must be dreaming. I told him that I love speech and debate too, and that I even won a state competition in high school. We eventually start dating and it is lovely. He finally ends up showing me the documentary. It is about people graduating high school and their different life stories. I'm enjoying the documentary so far. Pause that crap right now, I exclaim. Midway through his show, he pauses it reluctantly. Rewind it, just a little bit. My heart is almost palpitating at this point. He pauses it again, and we stare at each other in awe for a few moments. It was me. I was in the documentary, years before we ever met, and he freaking filmed little 16-year-old, pink-haired me. That's some soulmate crap right there, he said. I had gone to St. Augustine for a short weekend trip. On the way there I just happened to think about this girl I'd gone to college with in Orlando. Hadn't talked to her in years and just kinda wondered what she might be up to. Ran into her in a bar there the first night. She was there celebrating graduating PA school and we got a chance to catch up. So, the first time I ever farted in front of my GF was the exact time she farted in front of me for the first time. We were laying in bed and we both farted and looked at each other confused and anxious. We laughed quite a bit after. AWW, your butts are in love. My first wife had a boyfriend in high school that became CEO of the largest producer of pornography in the world. My second wife was the first insurance executive to insure a pornography producer. It launched her career. Same guy. I was at a Walmart with my dad just after a snowstorm when we found a dash cam on sale for about $5. We thought, hey, that's a good deal, and bought it. We finished shopping and hooked it up in his truck to make sure it worked properly and drove away. As we left the parking lot, I looked at him and said, "You know, it'd be pretty funny if we got into a car accident on the way home." We laughed and continued on our merry way. 10 minutes down the road, some lady loses control of her car going around an icy curve and slams into us. Her car's totaled. Our car's totaled. But thankfully no one is hurt. The cops that arrived initially thought that we were at fault due to how the tire marks in the snow looked, but thanks to the dash cam we literally just bought, we were cleared of any wrongdoing. It still creeps me out that I called a car accident, and I avoid making that joke now out of fear that God will call me out on my bulls again. You forgot to knock on wood. Back before cell phones, my twin sister, Utasha 8NZ, and I would call each other on the landline. Often one of us would pick up the phone just as the other finished dialing and it wouldn't ring on either end. It happened all the time. I went on a mediocre first date with a guy on Tinder. The topics of conversation never really reached past what do you like to do for fun, what do you do for work level, so I didn't know much about him. Later in the week I had a dream that he was previously married and got divorced 1 year and 4 months prior. I thought it was a funny dream and a way to start a conversation about weird dreams, but it got awkward fast when he told me that was the date he separated from his ex-wife and is in fact now divorced. He thought I was fricking with him. I was visiting a relative in Oberlin, Ohio, who invited me to go with her to a student piano recital. She didn't know who the pianist was that day, but she often went to student recitals. When we were seated in the recital hall and given a program, I saw that the performer was one of my former piano students. What a wonderful surprise for both of us. The closest I got to this was my parents buying my best friend's piano teacher's house. She died. It was fun for me. I met a guy at my staff Christmas party with the same name, birth date, and was in the same career. We met through our girlfriends at the time, both named Jennifer. We shared many of the same physical features. Same colored hair and build. I still Google him from time to time to see if he has died yet. If he dies first, I win. If mods want to contact me I can prove this. It's freaking nuts. You're gonna die together. Unbeknownst to my sister and me, our mothers-in-law met in a third town and became BFFs. It finally came out like this. Her Mill, my deal is going to Thailand to visit her sister. Don't you have a son in Thailand? My Mill, yes, and my Dill's sister is visiting them soon. That was a bit of a confusion to imagine, but dang, that's some coincidence. In high school me and my best friend were obsessed with a Japanese pop group that's relatively unknown in the United States. One day when I was out shopping with my mom, I picked up a Magic 8 ball and asked it if I'd ever see the group in concert. The ball said yes. I scoffed and put it back on the shelf. The moment I got home I got a call from my friend telling me that the group was having a free concert in a nearby city and she'd gotten tickets for both of us. Spent a family outing at the beach, Wales, when I was 6 years old. Met a girl the same age and became friends for the day. Fast forward 7 years to a school trip to Paris. A girl comes out of the crowd, hey, I know you. I met you on the beach once and a fish bit your foot. My powerful fish related meltdown must have really stuck with her. Finding the great women of medieval Europe, who I've studied since I was a kid history geek. On my family tree a few years ago, I've been studying my own ancestors and didn't know it. That is cool. My wife's birthday is exactly 10 weeks after mine. We now have a daughter with a birthday exactly 10 weeks before mine. It also means we have the same weekday for our birthdays each year. I was in the same class as a girl with the exact same name as me. First, middle and last. Born the same day as me at the same hospital. My brother was in the same class as her brother, both had the exact same names. First, middle and last. And both born on the same day at the same hospital. It was pretty weird. When the universe hits copy and paste on accident. I used to host travelers who were coming through my town via the couchsurfing website. I live in a tourist town, and in the first few months I hosted, I had literally hundreds of travelers come through and stay with me. One group in particular really hit it off with me. They were there on my birthday, and while I was at work they made me a cake even though they hadn't met me yet. Then, they came out with my friends and I to celebrate that evening. They were awesome, but they were only staying one night and then headed off in different, yet to be determined directions. This was also one of the years when there was a super bloom in the Anza Borrego Desert State Park in California. A few weeks after that awesome group stayed with me, my friend and I drove 14 hours one way to join thousands of other travelers who wanted to see the gorgeous wildflowers. We arrived at the visitors center and it felt like walking into an anthill. There were people everywhere. I was standing in line to ask a question about camping when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and found myself face to face with one of the girls who had been in the birthday group. She had no idea when she left that she would be heading this direction, and I had never mentioned to her that I would be there either. We wound up spending the whole afternoon together again, and it was absolutely awesome. I was working in a garden center in my hometown the summer before university. This family come along and explain that they are looking for a good houseplant for a university student. Turns out the teenage son of the family was going to the same university as me. I move in 2 weeks later, and that same guy is my flatmate. This is a specialist music college the other side of the country, BTW. Nothing exciting, but 2 days ago me and my friend were playing 3v3 D&D Arena just to work out some combat stuff. His barb uses a D12. We're using one from an inherited set. He rolls something high, then next turn rolls an 11, then the following turn rolls an 11. Dude, can I check the die? Roll 11. Roll 11. Roll 11. Here, you try it. Roll 11. Roll 11. Roll 3. Aha. But wait. What's on the opposite side of 3? 11. Roll 11. Roll 3. Roll 11. Q complaints about the die. What sort of sad tosser loads a D12, etc. Put die in bin. Play some more. Think harder about why anyone would load a D12. Retrieve die from bin. Rolls normally. There be spirits in the dice, laddie. When I was kid I was playing in Italy those kid machines where you play and get tickets for which you can choose some random toys, etc. So one day I tried for me unknown game and it was about coin flipping. You flip a coin with a button and how many times it lands on one side multiplied by some random that many tickets you get. And I flipped it 10 times on the same side and won around 5,000-6,000 tickets, which was ducking crazy. Everyone was watching us. It was amazing for me as a kid. And he is addicted to gambling. My time on a long trip to a beach, I locked the keys of my Chrysler Sebring in the trunk at a gas station. Well, for some reason you need the car to be on to open the trunk, and you need the keys for the car to be on. A dude who was watching me look was actually an engineer at Chrysler and had a key that could turn on any Chrysler car. I am the luckiest man alive. After work one evening, I stopped by to visit my blind father-in-law in the hospital. His leg had been amputated earlier in the week. Just the night before, my daughter, who is a young nurse, was visiting him and called me in tears about the care he, her grandfather, was receiving. You know it's bad if a nurse is crying about the care. I entered the elevator with a man in a suit. My mind went to medical sales for some reason. We got off the elevator on the same floor and turned in the same direction, but he was a little behind me. Now, I rarely talk to strangers, but I joked, I hope you aren't following me to my father-in-law's room because that would be too weird. He laughed and said, are they taking good care of him? I rolled my eyes and said, not really. Then he sided up to me and said, really? You want to talk to me about it? My stranger danger alarms went off, and I guess he could tell. He introduced himself and showed me the badge that was hanging from belt area, and then he quickly handed me his card. His title, Chief Operating Officer of the hospital. We moved to the nearest waiting area, in full view from the nurse's station, and chatted for at least 20 minutes. Suffice to say, my father-in-law had much better care for the duration of his stay. I got fired from a job after my last paycheck was running out. I got a check for unused vacation hours. When that was running out, I got this random check from a company whose product I'd bought months before. Like, hey, thanks for being a customer. Here's $20. That check was just enough to buy me food until I got my first paycheck at a new job. Ubaz Ibns and I were studying sign language interpreting. We're twins from a town 450 kilometers away. We met another interpreting student who was from a tiny town 30 minutes from our smallish 40k people, town. She was a twin too. She started crashing at our place when she missed the last bus to her place. She was talking to her mum and mentioned our very uncommon surname. Her father and grandfather worked for our grandfather before any of us were born. Your twin answered this question too, but they had a different answer. The license plate on my daughter's Saturn was Cassini, in honor of the Cassini gap in the rings. Okay, nerd alert. She was out of town for work when she got a call from her mechanic telling her that her car was ready, even though she hadn't brought it in for any reason. She told him that, but he described the car in his shop as a green Saturn with license plate number Cassini, which matched perfectly. At this point she called her office and confirmed that her car was in the parking lot. She called back to the mechanic and told him that. It went on like that until she finally discovered that the car had North Carolina plates, not Virginia. This happened in the Norfolk area, which is close to the border between those two states, but the odds against this still stun me every time I think about it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.